Welcome! Today, we're diving into the important differences between state offices and federal offices in the United States. Understanding these distinctions is crucial for anyone interested in how our government works, whether you're a student, a voter, or just curious about the structure of American governance. We'll explore what each type of office does, how they're organized, and why these differences matter in your daily life. By the end, you'll have a clear picture of how state and federal offices operate separately, yet together to serve the public. Let's get started by looking at the basic definitions of state and federal offices. State offices are government positions and agencies that operate within a single state's boundaries. They are responsible for managing state laws, services, and programs that directly affect the residents of that state. Examples include the governor, state legislators, and state departments like education or transportation. These offices are tailored to address the unique needs and priorities of their specific state, allowing for local control and decision-making. State offices often work closely with local governments to implement policies and provide services. Next, let's see how federal offices differ in their scope and responsibilities. Federal offices are part of the national government and have authority across all 50 states. These offices handle issues that affect the entire country, such as national defense, foreign policy, and federal taxation. Key examples include the President, members of Congress, and federal agencies like the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security. Federal offices create and enforce laws that apply to everyone in the United States, regardless of which state they live in. Their decisions often set the framework within which state offices operate. Now, let's compare the main functions of state and federal offices. One of the biggest differences between state and federal offices is their jurisdiction, or the area over which they have authority. State offices only have power within their own state's borders, while federal offices have authority that spans the entire country. For example, a state governor can make decisions that affect only their state, but the president's decisions can impact all Americans. This separation ensures that both local and national interests are represented and managed appropriately. Next, we'll look at how laws are made at each level. Both state and federal offices have the power to make laws, but the scope of those laws is different. State legislatures pass laws that apply only within their state, covering issues like education, transportation, and public safety. Federal offices, such as Congress, create laws that apply to the entire nation, dealing with matters like immigration, civil rights, and interstate commerce. Sometimes, state and federal laws can overlap, but if there's a conflict, federal law usually takes precedence. Let's move on to see how officials are elected or appointed at each level. The process for selecting officials in state and federal offices can differ. Most state officials, like governors and legislators, are elected by the people of that state. Some state positions, such as judges or department heads, may be appointed by the governor or legislature. At the federal level, the president and members of Congress are elected by voters across the country or within their districts. Federal judges and agency heads are usually appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. This system ensures a mix of direct democracy and checks and balances. Next, let's examine the funding sources for each office. State and federal offices are funded in different ways. State offices rely primarily on state taxes, such as income, sales, and property taxes, as well as federal grants. Federal offices are funded through national taxes, like federal income tax, and sometimes borrow money to cover expenses. The way each office is funded affects the programs and services they can offer. For example, a state may have more flexibility to fund local priorities, while federal offices focus on nationwide programs. Now, let's look at the types of services each office provides. The services offered by state and federal offices reflect their different roles. State offices typically manage public education, local roads, police, and health services. Federal offices handle national defense, Social Security, Medicare, and immigration. Some services, like disaster relief or transportation funding, may involve both state and federal offices working together. Understanding who provides which service helps citizens know where to turn for help. Next, we'll explore how state and federal offices interact with each other. State and federal offices often need to work together to address complex issues. For example, disaster response usually involves both state emergency agencies and federal organizations like FEMA. Funding for highways, education, and healthcare often comes from both levels of government. These partnerships can sometimes lead to disagreements over who is responsible for what, but they are essential for tackling big challenges. Next, let's discuss the concept of federalism, which underpins these relationships. Federalism is the system that divides power between state and federal governments. It's a core principle of the U.S. Constitution, designed to balance local autonomy with national unity. Under federalism, certain powers are reserved for the states, while others are given to the federal government. This structure allows states to experiment with policies that fit their populations, while the federal government ensures consistency on national issues. Next, we'll look at some real-world examples of how federalism works in practice. Education is a great example of how state and federal offices interact. States are primarily responsible for running public schools, setting curriculum, and funding local districts. However, the federal government provides additional funding and sets certain standards, such as those in the Every Student Succeeds Act. This partnership allows for local control while ensuring all students have access to quality education. Let's move on to another example. Healthcare. Healthcare policy also shows the division between state and federal offices. States manage Medicaid, public health programs, and licensing for medical professionals. The federal government oversees Medicare, sets national health standards, and funds research. Sometimes, states expand Medicaid with federal approval, showing how both levels can innovate and collaborate. Next, let's look at law enforcement as another area of overlap. Law enforcement is handled at both the state and federal levels. State police and local sheriffs enforce state laws, while federal agencies like the FBI handle crimes that cross state lines or involve federal law. Sometimes, these agencies work together on investigations, sharing resources and expertise. This cooperation helps ensure public safety across all levels of government. Now, let's explore how courts are structured in state and federal systems. The United States has both state and federal court systems. State courts handle cases involving state laws, such as family disputes or traffic violations. Federal courts deal with cases involving federal laws, constitutional issues, or disputes between states. Each system has its own judges, procedures, and appeals process. Sometimes, a case can move from state to federal court if it involves both types of law. Next, let's compare the structure of these court systems. State court systems usually have 3 levels: trial courts, appellate courts, and a state Supreme Court. Trial courts handle most cases first, while appellate courts review decisions if someone appeals. The state Supreme Court is the highest authority for state law. Judges may be elected or appointed, depending on the state. This structure allows for local resolution of disputes and appeals within the state. Next, we'll look at the federal court structure. The federal court system also has 3 main levels: district courts, circuit courts of appeals, and the U.S. Supreme Court. District courts are the starting point for most federal cases. Appeals go to the circuit courts, and the Supreme Court is the final authority on federal law. Federal judges are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, serving lifetime terms. This system ensures consistency in interpreting federal law across the country. Now, let's discuss the types of cases each court handles. State courts handle cases like divorce, property disputes, and most criminal offenses. Federal courts hear cases involving the Constitution, federal laws, or disputes between states or with foreign governments. Some cases, like civil rights lawsuits, can be heard in either system. Knowing which court to approach depends on the nature of the law involved. Next, let's look at how appeals work in both systems. In both state and federal systems, parties can appeal a court's decision if they believe a legal error was made. In state courts, appeals move up to the state appellate courts and then to the state Supreme Court. In federal courts, appeals go from district courts to circuit courts, and possibly to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court chooses which cases to hear, focusing on those with national importance. Now, let's discuss the role of constitutions at each level. Each state has its own constitution, which outlines the structure and powers of state government. State constitutions can provide more rights than the U.S. Constitution, but not fewer. They set rules for elections, government organization, and individual rights within the state. State offices must follow both their own constitution and federal law. Next, let's look at the U.S. Constitution's role for federal offices. The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It establishes the structure of the federal government, outlines the powers of each branch, and guarantees basic rights for all Americans. Federal offices must operate within the limits set by the Constitution. When state and federal laws conflict, the Constitution gives federal law the upper hand. Now, let's discuss how amendments affect both state and federal offices. Both state and federal constitutions can be amended, but the process is different. States usually allow amendments through voter referendums or legislative approval. The U.S. Constitution requires approval by 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the states. Amendments can expand or limit the powers of offices at each level. For example, the 17th Amendment changed how U.S. senators are elected. Next, let's look at the checks and balances in each system. State governments have their own systems of checks and balances. The governor can veto laws passed by the legislature. Courts can declare laws unconstitutional, and legislatures can override vetoes. This system prevents any one branch from becoming too powerful. State offices must work together and respect each other's roles. Next, let's see how checks and balances work at the federal level. At the federal level, checks and balances are built into the Constitution. The president can veto bills from Congress, Congress can override vetoes and impeach officials, and the Supreme Court can rule laws unconstitutional. These mechanisms ensure that power is shared and that federal offices are accountable to each other and the public. Now, let's discuss how state and federal offices handle emergencies. During emergencies, state and federal offices must coordinate their efforts. States lead the initial response to disasters like hurricanes or wildfires, using local resources and agencies. If the situation is severe, federal offices like FEMA provide additional support, funding, and expertise. This partnership ensures a faster and more effective response. Next, let's look at how each level communicates with the public. Both state and federal offices have a duty to keep the public informed. State offices use press releases, social media, and public meetings to share information about local issues. Federal offices communicate about national policies, emergencies, and new laws. Clear communication helps build trust and ensures that citizens know where to get help or information. Now, let's discuss the accountability of state and federal offices. State and federal offices are held accountable through elections, audits, and oversight agencies. Voters can remove officials who don't perform well. Independent agencies review spending and investigate misconduct. At both levels, transparency laws require offices to share information with the public. These mechanisms help ensure that government serves the people effectively. Next, let's look at the role of political parties in state and federal offices. Political parties play a major role in both state and federal offices. They help organize elections, recruit candidates, and shape policy platforms. At the state level, parties may focus on local issues, while at the federal level, they address national concerns. Party affiliation can influence how officials vote and what policies they support. Next, let's discuss the impact of lobbying and interest groups. Lobbyists and interest groups try to influence decisions in both state and federal offices. They represent businesses, unions, or causes, and advocate for policies that benefit their members. State offices may be more accessible to local groups, while federal offices deal with larger, national organizations. This advocacy is a normal part of democracy, but it's regulated to prevent corruption. Next, let's look at the role of the media. The media acts as a watchdog over both state and federal offices. Journalists report on government actions, investigate scandals, and inform the public about important issues. Media coverage can shape public opinion and hold officials accountable. Both levels of government rely on the media to communicate their messages and respond to criticism. Now, let's discuss how technology is changing state and federal offices. Technology is transforming how state and federal offices operate. Online services make it easier for citizens to access information, pay taxes, or apply for benefits. Both levels use data and digital tools to improve efficiency and transparency. Cybersecurity is a growing concern, as offices must protect sensitive information. Next, let's look at the challenges faced by state and federal offices. State offices face unique challenges, such as budget constraints, changing demographics, and local economic shifts. They must balance the needs of urban and rural areas and respond quickly to local crises. States also compete for federal funding and must comply with national standards. These challenges require flexibility and innovation. Next, let's see what challenges federal offices face. Federal offices deal with large-scale issues like national security, economic policy, and international relations. They must coordinate with all 50 states and manage complex programs. Political gridlock and bureaucracy can slow decision-making. Federal offices also face scrutiny from the public and media. These challenges make federal governance a demanding task. Next, let's compare the flexibility of state and federal offices. State offices often have more flexibility to try new policies and respond to local needs. They can serve as laboratories of democracy, experimenting with solutions that, if successful, may be adopted by other states or even at the federal level. Federal offices, on the other hand, must ensure consistency across the nation, which can limit their ability to innovate quickly. Next, let's look at how citizens can participate in both state and federal offices. Citizens can get involved in both state and federal offices by voting, attending public meetings, or serving on advisory boards. At the state level, it's often easier to contact officials or influence local policies. Federal offices offer opportunities to participate in national debates, comment on regulations, or run for office. Active participation strengthens democracy at every level. Next, let's discuss the impact of state and federal offices on daily life. State and federal offices both shape our daily lives in important ways. State offices influence local schools, roads, and public safety, while federal offices affect taxes, healthcare, and national security. Understanding which office is responsible for what helps citizens advocate for their needs and hold officials accountable. Next, let's look at how disputes between state and federal offices are resolved. When state and federal offices disagree, courts often step in to resolve the conflict. The U.S. Supreme Court has the final say on constitutional issues and can strike down state or federal laws that violate the Constitution. This process ensures that both levels of government operate within their legal boundaries. Next, let's discuss the importance of cooperation between state and federal offices. Cooperation between state and federal offices is essential for effective governance. Many issues, like public health, transportation, and disaster response, require joint action. By working together, both levels can pool resources, share expertise, and better serve the public. Cooperation also helps prevent duplication of efforts and confusion. Next, let's look at some historical examples of state-federal relations. The Civil Rights Movement is a powerful example of state and federal offices interacting. In the 1960s, some states resisted desegregation, but federal offices enforced civil rights laws and court decisions. This conflict led to landmark Supreme Court cases and new federal legislation. It shows how federal offices can step in to protect individual rights when states fall short. Next, let's look at another example: disaster response. Major disasters, like Hurricane Katrina, highlight the need for cooperation between state and federal offices. Initial response comes from state and local agencies, but federal offices provide critical support and resources. Delays or miscommunication can lead to serious problems, emphasizing the importance of clear roles and teamwork. Now, let's discuss how state and federal offices adapt to changing times. Both state and federal offices must adapt to new challenges, such as technological advances, demographic shifts, and global events. They update laws, policies, and services to meet the needs of a changing society. Flexibility and innovation are key to staying effective and relevant. Next, let's look at the future of state and federal offices. Looking ahead, state and federal offices will continue to evolve. Issues like climate change, cybersecurity, and healthcare will require new approaches and stronger cooperation. Technology will play a bigger role in how offices operate and serve the public. The balance between state and federal power may shift as new challenges arise. Next, let's summarize the key differences between state and federal offices. To recap, state offices operate within one state and focus on local issues, while federal offices have nationwide authority and handle national matters. They differ in jurisdiction, funding, services, and how officials are chosen. Both levels have unique challenges and strengths, but together they form a government that serves all Americans. Understanding these differences helps you navigate government and advocate for your needs. Next, let's look at why these differences matter. The differences between state and federal offices matter because they ensure that both local and national interests are addressed. This balance allows for tailored solutions to local problems while maintaining unity on national issues. It also gives citizens multiple ways to participate and influence government. By understanding these differences, you can be a more informed and effective citizen. Next, let's see how you can learn more. If you're interested in learning more about state and federal offices, there are many resources available. Government websites, libraries, and educational organizations offer information on how each office works. Attending public meetings or volunteering can also provide firsthand experience. Staying informed helps you make better decisions and contribute to your community. Finally, let's wrap up with a summary of what we've covered. In conclusion, state and federal offices each play vital roles in American government. Their differences in jurisdiction, powers, and responsibilities ensure that both local and national interests are served. By understanding how these offices work, you can better participate in democracy and advocate for your needs. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of state and federal offices. Stay curious and engaged in your government.